Hi everybody. Sorry I haven't made a video in a couple weeks, but I really haven't had much of anything significant to say. But I think I do now. And it's a result of a conversation that I had with my son, actually. And I think I came up with some insights that are very interesting that you might find useful about the psychology of savings. So let me talk about my son a little bit. For a couple years I've been trying to teach him about savings by giving him an allowance. Now, I tend to detach this from the household chores because I think the chores are something that people ought to do as being part of a household. And so I just give him an allowance of about $5 per week just to teach him how to save responsibly and spend with a little bit of discipline. But it was discouraging for the first year that I was doing this because it seemed like every time he had some cash in hand, he would end up spending it on something frivolous, and then he would end up regretting it afterwards. So we took advantage of a credit union. You see, at school, the teachers basically came out and promoted to the parents and the students that we had this new credit union available, and they were going to allow people to keep money there with no minimum balance, just to teach the kids how to save with discipline. And so we put a little bit of money in there just to keep our son from spending it so that he could actually see the balance every month and know that he had some money set aside. We didn't think much about it until, a few months later when they actually did charge us a penalty, and we noticed that they took $5 out of a $20 balance, and they had communicated it to us in a mailing which we actually didn't read, and that was our fault. So what it ended up teaching our kids was that they really couldn't trust other people with their money, which I guess is a worthwhile lesson to learn, but it really wasn't what we wanted to teach. So I decided that rather than, giving my son an allowance in paper money or putting it in a bank account or credit union, I would just start giving him silver. So once a week, I give him a silver quarter. And he seems to appreciate this quite a bit. In fact, he values the silver quarter much more than he values a paper $5 bill. And so, over time, he's actually stacked this up, and because it's a little bit more awkward to spend than paper money because we actually have to go to a coin broker, or he has to come to me and ask me for paper in exchange for it, it actually piles up. And what we do is over time, when he wants to, he can take a couple of his coins and trade them in for a bigger coin. So he ends up with more interesting pieces. He may end up with a half. He'll get an allowance 1 week, and then the next week he'll trade his quarter in for another half. And then gradually he ends up taking those halves and he trades them in for bigger pieces that are of even more interest to him. Sorry you can't see this, but that's a peace dollar. But what was amazing to me is yesterday I talked to him because I had given him his regular quarter as an allowance, and I asked him, so, how much have you managed to save up so far? And he said to me, well, gee, Dad, I don't know. Why don't I bring you my whole pile and let's count it out? And so I helped him count it, and I saw that he had actually quite a bit. My son's 11, and so I think that this is a pretty impressive achievement, but he has managed to accumulate about $150 worth of silver so far, which is a tremendous accomplishment for a kid his age, I think. And when I told him that it was about $150 worth, his first response was, wow, that really added up quickly. He didn't ask me to trade it in for money so that he could go buy something expensive. All he knew was that he had wealth. And I think that that's very insightful of him. I'm very proud of him for being willing to keep this money. Maybe someday he'll have enough that he can actually buy his first car with the money he's accumulated. And because he's saving it in silver, I'm confident that it's going to keep up with the increase in the general price level of various goods and services. But anyway, I didn't want to tell you all about my son's allowance. What I wanted to do was I wanted to link it to the adult psychology of savings. You see, it got me to thinking. I remember a study that had been done a while back by a banking association, and what they had concluded was that people tend to spend more money when they use credit cards than when they use cash. And it has to do with the experience of pain. See, when people swipe a credit card, they don't feel the pain because they don't feel like they're giving anything up. Yet when they fork over cash, they actually feel a little bit of a pain response. And I think that has to do with, liquidity. So there's a lot of liquidity in unlocking your own credit, but it's a little bit more difficult to deal with physical paper notes. And if you end up saving in paper notes, I think you would actually end up saving more than if you had money in a checking account, because in a checking account, you're basically just writing checks. You never really see the money leaving your hands. And so I think that despite the fact that keeping cash gives you no interest, you may actually be better off in the long run if you just use cash rather than keep your money in a checking account. Now, don't get me wrong, I think you need that checking account, for paying your monthly bills, but as a primary savings vehicle, it might not be that good. Same thing goes for stocks and bonds, because it's very, very easy to click that online transaction button and change your investments or make a withdrawal and spend the money on something that maybe in the long run you would regret. And so it got me to thinking about gold and silver. When we save in gold and silver, we actually reduce our liquidity a little bit and make it a little bit harder to spend the money. Now, obtaining silver and gold is easy enough. It's very easy to write a check to your local coin shop or go to an online broker and send them a request to send you some gold or silver in return for a personal check or even a swipe of your credit card. But when you want to go and take this wealth that you've accumulated and turn it into something else, it requires that you sell this silver or gold in return for paper money before you do that transaction. And I think that triggers the pain response somewhat. It's a little bit inconvenient. It really makes you think about what you're doing before you go to sell. And so I think in the long run, saving in gold and silver may actually benefit a person, not just because gold and silver are stable and they keep up with the cost of living, but also because it's a little bit more difficult to part with, not only because of the convenience factor, but also because we tend to grow sentimentally attached to things like this. And when we actually need money, I would empty my bank account before I would sell any of my gold or silver. Unless, of course, the gold or silver I thought was very highly priced at the time. But again, that takes a lot of thought to figure out that that's what you want to do. So I think from a psychological standpoint, there's a lot to saving in gold and silver. It really does help you maintain discipline. And when you think about it, adults really aren't that much different from children when it comes to money. The same psychological impulses drive us. We like to make impulsive buys. And so there's a lot that we can learn from our kids, I think. Why don't you think about putting yourself on an allowance? Give yourself a certain amount of gold and silver per month. Let it stack up. Don't touch it for years. And in years, pull out your box. See how much wealth you've accumulated.